Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kyle Hawthorne, and today we are going to get into Matthew chapter 8. Super excited about this chapter. It's packed full of just a rapid fire series of demonstrations of Jesus' power and authority. I love this chapter. But before we do, I want to clarify something that I said about Matthew chapter 7. Now, I mentioned the narrow and the wide gates, and I alluded to the idea that the wide gates were representative of the Pharisaic system, this idea that you can somehow achieve salvation or achieve righteousness before God through your own merit by adhering to the law, keeping the law. And although I do think that that is true and that idea does lead to destruction. It is a wide path to destruction. I don't think that the wide path is limited to that. I think that's the way that Jesus's original hearers and Matthew's original readers would have probably understood this parable, but certainly we can see today that there are so many paths that people pursue to try to obtain security for themselves, salvation for themselves. And this is as I say, every man-made system, every religion, anything that excludes Jesus and his righteousness and his work, and anything that excludes faith in him, everything that he represents. Jesus makes it really clear that nobody comes to the Father except through me. So he clearly is the narrow gate, and the wide gate is everything else, including that Pharisaic system. So I just want to clarify that. Let's get into Matthew chapter 8. It's a big chapter, so hang in there with me. We'll go through it a piece at a time. Starting in verse 1, it says, "When Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. And a leper came to him and bowed down before him and said, 'Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean.' Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, 'I am willing, be cleansed.' And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, 'See that you tell no one, but go, show yourself to the priest, and present an offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them.'" Okay, this is fascinating because there's only one other recorded instance of someone being healed of leprosy, and that's in the Old Testament where Miriam was healed. I want to say prior to this moment, and that's when Miriam was healed. So this presentation of a healed leper would have astonished the priests. And in fact, I'm not sure they would have even known what to do. They probably had never performed this cleansing ceremony as it's indicated. And I want to look at this because Jesus says that this would be a testimony to them. So if you turn to Leviticus chapter 14, this is where the instructions are given to perform this cleansing ceremony upon the healing of someone with leprosy. And I want you to think about the imagery that's being put into these words and just how reflective that is of Jesus. It says here in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 1, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 'This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. Now he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go to the outside of the camp. Thus the priest shall look, and if the infection of leprosy has been healed in the leper,'" so this is if someone's already been healed. I know it's a cleansing ceremony, but the cleansing is not the healing. The healing has already been done. "Then the priest shall give orders to take 2 live, clean birds and cedar wood and a scarlet string and hyssop for the one who is to be cleansed. The priest shall also give orders to slay the one bird in an earthenware vessel." Think about that, an earthenware vessel, Jesus coming in the flesh, the incarnation, over running water. "As for the living bird, he shall take it together with the cedar wood and the scarlet string and the hyssop, and shall dip them and the live bird in the blood of the bird that was slain over the running water. He shall then sprinkle 7 times the one who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the live bird go free over the open field. Okay, there's a couple more verses here, but we're going to stop there. I mean, just think about that imagery where you have one bird sacrificed and the second bird that is cleansed through that sacrifice, dipped in the blood with the wood, with the scarlet thread, and that bird is set free. I mean, just think about our salvation and how we're cleansed, the sacrifice of Jesus, the blood of Jesus, and then the freedom that we have in Christ. I mean, this imagery is all over this particular cleansing ceremony. And so it's no wonder that Jesus says that this is going to be a testimony to the priests. And I also want to pause for a second and just think about the magnitude of someone being healed of leprosy and how that represents everything that Jesus embodies. I mean, lepers were not allowed to participate in any of like the temple activities, any of the tabernacle, or not the tabernacle, but yes, in the Old Testament it would have been the tabernacle, but any of these like ceremonial pieces of the law. They were not even allowed to live within inside of the town. They were confined to these colonies. They couldn't see their friends, couldn't see their family. So it was really a life that was just full of rejection on every front. And so Jesus comes to just bring those people back into the fold. It's a beautiful reflection of who Jesus is. Okay, let's pick up in verse 5. It says, "And when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, imploring him and saying, 'Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, fearfully tormented.' Jesus said to him, 'I will come and heal him.' But the centurion said, 'Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, Go, and he goes. And to another, Come, and he comes. And to my slave, Do this, and he does it.' Now when Jesus heard this, he marveled, and said to those who were following, 'Truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many will come from the east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, but the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.' And Jesus said to the centurion, 'Go, it shall be done for you as you have believed.' And the servant was healed at that very moment." Okay, astonishing here that Jesus, one, uses this word marveled. It says he marveled and said to those who were following, "Truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel." This word in the Greek is used actually a lot in the Gospels, but it's never used to describe Jesus' reaction. It's always used to describe the people's reaction to what Jesus has done. They say it will say like they marveled at his teaching, or they marveled at his miracles or his healings. And this faith that Jesus had been looking for, going to the lost sheep of Israel, we'll read in 2 chapters how he even tells his disciples, only go to the lost sheep of Israel. I mean, he clearly prioritizes his people, these sons of the kingdom, and yet he must have been just horrified to see what the nation had become. And it says, look, he was looking for this faith in Israel and he didn't find it. And he finds it in this Gentile, a Roman centurion who has a clear understanding of authority. He has a clear faith in who Jesus was. And it prompts Jesus to make this proclamation of just what is going to unfold in these future years and decades and centuries, really, where the sons of the kingdom are going to be cast out into outer darkness. And there's going to be people from the east and west that are going to come and recline at the table of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Gentile inclusion, the idea of the gospel message going out into all of the world as Jesus instructs in Acts, it's really foreshadowed in these passages. Okay, picking up in verse 14, Jesus goes to Peter's house. It says, when Jesus came into Peter's home, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and waited on him. Now, if you've ever had a fever, especially one that requires you to be bedbound, and I don't know about you or any men who are listening, but women typically have a much higher pain tolerance, at least my wife does. And so I'm kind of like a big baby when I'm sick, but my wife is very tough. And so if a woman of the household, especially at a time where you're going to be visited by someone like Jesus, is laying in bed with a fever, you know this is bad. I mean, this is probably a rough sickness. And you also know that when you get better, when your fever kind of finally breaks, you don't immediately regain all your strength. I mean, typically, if you're anything like me, you haven't eaten for a while, and so you kind of slowly start eating like maybe saltine crackers, clear liquids, things like that, and you might slowly kind of regain your strength over a series of several days, especially if it's a bedbound type of sickness and fever. But it says she got up immediately and waited on him. So this is like a complete restoration. This is like reaching all the way into the core of this sickness and bringing a complete healing. And that's really reflective of the next two verses when it says, when evening came, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were ill. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. This is not like a patchwork healing. This is him, the idea of him like taking them and bearing them and carrying them. This is a complete restoration that he's bringing, and he's bringing it upon himself. It's like this idea of him looking around at all the havoc that sin has been wreaking on the world, and Jesus entering into that sin and really accomplishing a complete inside-out restoration. Verse 18 picks up with a declaration that Jesus saw these crowds around him, and says, now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to depart to the other side of the sea. Then a scribe came and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus said to him, the foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of the disciples said to him, Lord, permit me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, follow me and allow the dead to bury their own dead. Now, okay, first impression might be that Jesus is being a little harsh here, but consider what's happening now in Jesus' ministry. He has large crowds that are following him. He's gaining a lot of notoriety. In fact, that there's times where I think people are probably attaching themselves to Jesus just because he's getting famous now. I mean, that's why I think he's telling a lot of the people in the Jewish areas not to tell anybody about their healings, because he didn't come to be a king that looks for worldly fame and notoriety. I mean, he came as a suffering servant. And he makes that really clear to this first scribe that comes to him. We don't know the scribe's heart, but I suspect that there might not have been the most pure motivations behind his desire to follow Jesus. And so Jesus responds, basically telling this scribe that, I'm not even cared for as well as some of the animals here. I mean, they have a home, they have a place to lay their head. I don't even have a pillow to lay my head on. And if you want to follow me, you better be prepared to follow the model that I'm putting on display. And the second disciple that says to him, when Jesus tells him to depart for the other side of the sea, he kind of gives this excuse and says, well, let me go and bury my father first. A lot of people think that this guy's father wasn't even dead yet. We don't really know. But regardless, Jesus tells him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. When Jesus gives you a command, you don't get to decide whether you think it is right for you to follow it. You are just asked to follow it. And this is like an authority structure that the centurion clearly had a really like clear understanding of. And some of these other people that Jesus was encountering, they didn't understand just the authority that Jesus brought with him. So now Jesus gets into the boat and he starts crossing the sea. It says, when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being covered with the waves. But Jesus himself was asleep. And they came to him and woke him, saying, Save us, Lord, we are perishing. He said to them, Why are you afraid, you men of little faith? Then he got up, rebuked the winds and the sea, and it became perfectly calm. The men were amazed and said, What kind of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Okay, a lot of things that are striking right here. One is, these are seasoned fishermen, so I suspect this was a serious storm. The word for here is like the same as earthquake, when it talks about there arose a great storm on the sea and the boat was being covered with the waves. And then what's also fascinating is you have this picture of these two just opposite perspectives of what's happening. You have Jesus, who is clearly always focused on the spiritual realm. Paul talks about our battles not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and the principalities in the heavenly places. And it's this idea that, listen, it doesn't matter what our circumstances are. This life is a vapor, and there's nothing that God can't overcome. I mean, Jesus made this lake. He's the creator of the heavens and the earth. Of course, he has authority over this teeny tiny storm. I mean, this is such a minuscule problem, and Jesus is acting like it. I mean, he's asleep. I mean, do you know how much peace you have to have? How much just ability to kind of rest your mind in order to fall asleep in the middle of chaos like this? But it just demonstrates that. And then on the other side of the equation, you have these disciples who are completely focused on their circumstances. They're like hyper focused on what's right in front of them. And these spiritual truths, I mean, they're with the Son of God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. And I just don't think they get it at this point. They just don't get it. And Jesus makes that clear to him when he rebukes them before he even rebukes the wind and the waves. He says, you are men of little faith. And then he gets up and rebukes the winds and the sea. I find that fascinating because you think, well, the winds cause the waves, and so you rebuke the wind and then the waves will calm down. But it says that everything was immediately calm, which wouldn't be the case if you just, if you've ever been fishing and the wind stops, it takes a while for kind of the waves to sort of smooth themselves out on the water. But here it became perfectly calm. And I think this is the point where the disciples are finally starting to grasp just the magnitude of Jesus's identity. It says that they were amazed and said, what kind of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Okay, so the reason Jesus told him to get in this boat and go depart to the other side of the sea is because he's trying to get to this area of the Gadarenes, which is interesting because this is not a Jewish area. This is a Gentile area. Everybody who heard these orders would have known that, which makes me think he probably weeded out some of the crowd when he was talking about that. And maybe that's part of the reason this the scribe was so quick to say, like, I'll follow you anywhere, even like to the non-Jewish area. I mean, we're going to read about pigs here. I mean, clearly this was not a kosher food. This was a Gentile area. So let's read this section and talk about it, this confronting of the demonic forces in this area, this Gentile area. It says in verse 28, When he came to the other side, into the country of the Gadarenes, 2 men who were demon-possessed met him as they were coming out of the tombs. They were so extremely violent that no one could pass by that way. And they cried out, saying, "What business do we have with each other, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now there was a herd of many swine feeding at a distance from them. The demons began to entreat him, saying, "If you are going to cast us out, send us into the herd of swine." And he said to them, "Go." And they came out and went into the swine, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and perished in the waters. The herdsmen ran away and went to the city and reported everything, including what had happened to the demoniacs. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they implored him to leave their region. Okay, fascinating here that you have the disciples who seem to not understand yet who Jesus clearly was. And then, like 2 verses later, you have these demon-possessed men who immediately recognize who Jesus was. And so I wrote down 6 things I think that this passage illustrates about evil, about demonic forces, about the principles of the kind of the legion of Satan in this world, and they're as follows. So 1, there is an immediate recognition of Jesus' true identity as God's Son, and there is in turn, in conjunction with that, an admission that they have nothing in common with us. I mean, the demons say it right away. They say, "What business do we have with each other, Son of God?" I mean, they get it. They're like, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum here. They also, what's interesting here is they acknowledge their ultimate spiritual fate. They know that they are going to be cast into the lake of fire at the end of the age. And they even say that. They say, "If you are going to cast us out, send us into the herd of swine." There's another account that talks about, "Have you come to cast us into the pit before the intended time?" And it's, let's see here. Oh, it's in this account. "Have you come here to torment us before the time?" And so they know their spiritual fate. So, and they're demonstrating that, in my opinion. Okay, so number 3, because they knew, the men and these demons, they demonstrate this desire to not become disembodied. It's like they want a host. They want something to attach themselves to, which is really fascinating to me. I think it just speaks to the characteristics of demons, that they want to indwell. And it may just be part of the spiritual realm in general, is just the ability to indwell. We learn about the Holy Spirit indwelling, and so there's this spiritual principle of indwelling, both good and evil. So they demonstrate this, and they ask permission to enter a nearby herd of pigs. And the next characteristic that I recognize here is they demonstrate this like proclivity towards violence. It's almost like they can't help it. It's just part of their nature, is just to bring destruction wherever they go, and violence. It talks about nobody would go in this area because the men were so violent. Other accounts talk about how they tried to confine them with chains, and they would just break the chains. It's like they had this superhuman strength. And they immediately go into these pigs, and what's the first thing they do? They cause them to charge into the sea and drown themselves. And the last thing I'll say about what I think this shows about demonic characteristics is they have like a territorial nature to them. There is a portion in the book of Daniel that talks about the prince of Persia, and it's like this demon that is influencing this area. And even Michael, when he comes and delivers a message to Daniel, it says that he was delayed 3 days before. Or maybe it wasn't Michael. Maybe Michael came to free him. There was some angel who came to deliver a message to Daniel, and it says he was like waylaid. He was delayed 3 days because this powerful demon in the region of Persia, Medo-Persia area, had just confronted him, and they had this conflict. And so I do think that that's just true. When I look around the world today, it seems like there are some areas that are just, there's like a denser feeling of evil in those areas. Sodom and Gomorrah, these cities that Jesus would go to, and it says he couldn't even perform very many miracles because of their lack of faith. There seems to be more to demonic activity than just randomness, and them just like having no real sense of where they can be more useful than other areas. I think they know, and clearly this is an area where demonic activity was prevalent, and it had been for quite some time. All right, that's all I got for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it insightful. I hope you're enjoying going through the book of Matthew. If you are enjoying these videos, please like them and subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment. I'm just curious who's out there watching and what you guys think. So take care, and we'll see you in a few days. Thanks.